Lonely Cowboy hired her just to cook, but what she did next changed his life forever. The gunshot echoed across the valley before Jake Holloway even saw the rider. He dropped the fence post and grabbed his rifle, eyes scanning the ridge where dust rose in a cloud. 3 years alone on this ranch had sharpened his instincts, and right now every nerve screamed danger. The horse came fast, a chestnut mare with foam on her flanks. The rider was small, hunched low in the saddle and bleeding. Jake raised the rifle as the horse thundered into his yard, then stopped short when he saw her face. A woman, maybe 30, with a gash above her eye and terror in her expression. She slid off the horse and collapsed. Jake caught her before she hit the ground, his rifle clattering on the porch. Her shirt was torn, and through the fabric he saw bruises forming dark on her ribs. Blood soaked to her sleeve where something had cut deep. "They're coming," she gasped. "Please, I'll work. I'll do anything. Just don't send me back." Jake glanced at the ridge. Nothing yet, but he knew that wouldn't last. He hauled her inside, kicking the door shut. The cabin was sparse, just what a man alone needed. No comfort, no warmth, just walls and a roof. "Who's coming?" he demanded, setting her in the only chair. "My husband's men." Former husband. She winced as he examined her arm. "He doesn't like losing his property." Jake's jaw tightened. He'd heard stories about Carl Briggs, a cattle baron 2 valleys over who treated people worse than livestock. If Briggs wanted her back, he'd send his whole crew. "Can you cook?" Jake asked. She blinked at him, confused by the question while blood ran down her face. "I asked if you can cook. I need someone who can. Had an ad in town for 2 months. Nobody answered. I can cook." Her voice steadied slightly. "I can clean, mend, garden, whatever you need. Then you're hired. 60 a month, plus room and board. You stay in the back room. Keep to yourself. Do your job. I don't ask questions. You don't cause trouble. But they'll come here. Let them come." Jake moved to the window, rifle in hand. "This is my land. Nobody takes what's mine." Through the glass, he counted 5 riders cresting the ridge. They moved with the confidence of men who'd never been told no. Jake recognized Pete Dawson in front, Briggs's foreman, a man who smiled while he hurt people. The woman stood, swaying but determined. "I'm Claire. Claire Bennett. Jake Holloway. Now get in the back room and stay there. This won't take long." She hesitated, then moved toward the back of the cabin. Jake checked his ammunition and stepped onto the porch. The riders were close now, spreading out as they approached. Pete Dawson grinned like he'd already won. Jake levered around into the chamber and waited. Part 2, the 5 riders stopped 30 feet from the porch, their horses stamping and snorting. Pete Dawson sat his saddle like a king on a throne, thumbs hooked in his gun belt. The other 4 spread wide, hands resting near their weapons. Jake recognized 2 of them from town, hired guns who worked for whoever paid most. "Morning, Holloway," Pete called out, his grin never faltering. "Seems you got something that belongs to Mr. Briggs." "Nothing on my property belongs to anyone but me," Jake said. His rifle stayed casual, pointed at the ground, but his finger rested near the trigger. "Now, we can do this, easy or hard. The woman ran off with some valuables. We just want what's ours, then we'll be going. The only thing I got here is a cook I just hired. Legal contract. She stays." Pete's smile thinned. "You don't know who you're dealing with. Carl Briggs owns half this county. Judges, sheriffs, everyone who matters. You're just some broken-down cowboy living in the middle of nowhere because nobody can stand you." Jake had heard worse. 3 years ago, he'd returned from the war to find his wife and son buried in the family plot, victims of fever. The town had offered sympathy he didn't want. He'd sold everything except this patch of land his grandfather left him and disappeared into the hills. If people thought him mean or crazy, that suited him fine. "Your boss doesn't own me," Jake said. "And he doesn't own her anymore either. Now get off my land before I put holes in you." Pete's hand dropped to his gun. 5 against 1. Holloway. "You might get 1 of us, maybe 2, if you're lucky, but you'll be dead before you chamber the 3rd round. Maybe..." Jake shifted his weight. "But you'll be first, Pete. I promise you that. Your mama will bury you in that fancy suit you wore to the church social. Is this woman worth dying for?" The other men shifted nervously. Hired guns didn't mind killing, but they preferred odds that guaranteed they'd collect their pay. Pete's eyes narrowed, calculating. He was dangerous, but not stupid. "This isn't over," Pete finally said. Mr. Briggs is going to hear about this. He'll come himself if he has to. I'll be here, Jake said. The riders wheeled their horses and galloped back toward the ridge. Jake stayed on the porch until they disappeared, then waited another 10 minutes in case they circled back. When he was satisfied, he went inside. Claire stood in the doorway to the back room, pale but composed. She'd washed the blood from her face and tied her hair back. Without the terror and grime, Jake saw she was pretty in a tired way, like a flower that had survived too many hard winters. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me yet. They'll be back, and next time they'll bring more men. You need to tell me what happened. All of it." She nodded and moved to the stove, examining the cold ashes and dirty pots with a critical eye. "Can I make coffee while we talk? This kitchen is a disaster." Despite everything, Jake almost smiled. "I told you I needed a cook." Claire worked while she spoke, her hands steady as she built a fire and pumped water. "I married Carl Briggs 5 years ago. My father owed him money, and Carl said he'd forgive the debt if I became his wife. I was young and stupid and thought I could make it work. Your father let that happen? My father drank himself to death 6 months later. Carl was kind at first, almost gentle. Then I got pregnant." Her voice wavered but held. He was furious. Said he didn't want children, that I'd ruined everything. I lost the baby at 4 months. After that, he changed completely. Jake listened as she described years of isolation, of servants who watched her every move, of bruises hidden beneath long sleeves. Carl Briggs presented himself as a respectable businessman, a pillar of the community. Behind closed doors, he was a monster who enjoyed causing pain. 2 weeks ago, I overheard him talking to Pete. They were planning to sell a herd to the army using my father's brand. The cattle were stolen from ranches all over the territory. I realized Carl had never forgiven my father's debt. He'd collected it by stealing from everyone my father knew, using his brand to cover the theft. You have proof. I took his ledger, every transaction, every stolen cow, every bribed official. It's all there. She poured coffee into 2 tin cups, her hands trembling slightly now. I hid it before I ran. If I can get it to the territorial marshal, Carl goes to prison. Where is it? In a safe deposit box in Silver Creek. I have the key. She touched her neck where a thin chain disappeared beneath her collar. Jake drank the coffee. It was the best he'd tasted in 3 years. Rich and strong without being bitter. He studied Claire over the rim of his cup. She'd stopped running and started planning, which meant she was smart and brave. That combination was rare. Silver Creek is 100 miles east, he said. Briggs has men on every road between here and there. We'd never make it. I know. She met his eyes. I was going to wait, work for you like I promised, and save money for a stage ticket, but I didn't expect them to track me this fast. They'll watch this place now, day and night. I'm sorry. I've brought you nothing but trouble. Jake set down his cup. I hired a cook. You cooked. That's the end of it. The trouble is Briggs' doing, not yours. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. He thought about his wife, about how the town had failed to help her when she got sick because the doctor was drunk and nobody wanted to fetch another. He thought about his son buried before he was old enough to know his own name. He thought about all the times he'd needed help and received only sympathetic words that meant nothing. "'Cause it's right," he said simply. "Now finish your coffee. We have work to do. Part 3. Over the next 3 days, Jake taught Claire how to shoot. They started with an old revolver, practicing on tin cans lined up on the fence posts. She had good eyes and steady hands, but she flinched every time she pulled the trigger. "Stop anticipating the recoil," Jake said, standing behind her. "Breathe out slowly and squeeze. Don't jerk." She fired again. The can jumped and clattered to the ground. Claire turned to him with surprise and something like pride in her expression. "I hit it." "You did. Now do it 9 more times in a row." They practiced every morning after chores and every evening before dark. Jake watched the ridge constantly, knowing Briggs' men were out there somewhere. They'd see the smoke from the chimney, hear the occasional gunshot, and report back. Good. Let them know Claire wasn't helpless anymore. On the 4th morning, a rider appeared alone on the eastern trail. Jake grabbed his rifle, but Claire touched his arm. "Wait, that's Lucy Chen. She worked in Carl's house with me." The Chinese woman rode slowly, hands visible and empty. She was small and thin, wearing a plain dress and a worried expression. Jake kept his rifle ready as she approached. "Miss Claire," Lucy called out. "I need to speak with you, please." Claire stepped off the porch despite Jake's warning look. Lucy dismounted and hurried forward, glancing nervously at the ridge. They're planning something bad, Lucy said quickly. Mr. Briggs is furious. He's hired more men, including Johnny Gates. Jake's blood went cold. Johnny Gates was a killer, a man who'd murdered at least a dozen people and walked away every time because witnesses disappeared. If Briggs brought Gates into this, it meant he wanted Claire dead, not captured. When? Jake asked. 3 days from now. They're waiting for more men to arrive from Denver, 20 in total. They'll burn you out and take Miss Claire's body back, claim she died trying to escape again. Why are you telling us this? Claire asked. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. Because you were kind to me when nobody else was. Because Mr. Briggs is evil, and I'm tired of being afraid. I'm leaving town tonight, going to San Francisco, where my cousin lives. But I wanted to warn you first. Claire hugged her, and Lucy sobbed against her shoulder. Jake looked away, giving them privacy, but his mind raced. 3 days wasn't enough time to prepare for 20 men. They needed to leave, but Briggs would have the roads watched. Going cross-country meant traveling through rough terrain with limited supplies. There's a back trail, Jake said slowly. Goes up through the mountain pass and comes out near Silver Creek. It's dangerous, especially this time of year, but nobody knows about it except old-timers. My grandfather showed me when I was young. How long would it take? Claire asked. 5 days hard riding if the weather holds. Maybe 7 if we hit snow. Snow in April? This high up, anything's possible. Lucy pulled back from Claire, wiping her eyes. You should go now. Don't wait. We need supplies, Jake said. Food, ammunition, warm clothes. I can't get all that without going to town, and if I show up there now, someone will know something's happening. I can help, Lucy said. I'll go to the general store and buy what you need. Say I'm provisioning for Mr. Briggs. Nobody questions purchases made for him. They made a list. Jake gave Lucy money from the tin under his floorboard, more than he'd spent in the last year combined. She promised to bring everything before sunset and left at a gallop. Jake and Claire spent the day preparing. They packed light, taking only what they could carry on 2 horses. Jake selected his best mare for Claire and his grandfather's old gelding for himself. Both animals were mountain-bred, sure-footed, and tough. What about this place? Claire asked, looking around the cabin. You're leaving everything. It's just a place, Jake said, but that was a lie. This cabin held the last pieces of his old life, the memories of his grandfather's stories and his own broken dreams. Leaving meant admitting he'd never come back, never rebuild what he'd lost. Claire seemed to understand. She touched his arm gently. I'm sorry. Don't be. I've been alone here too long anyway. Maybe it's time for something different. Lucy returned as the sun touched the horizon, her horse loaded with supplies. She'd brought everything on the list, plus blankets, medical supplies, and a sack of apples. They transferred everything to Jake's horses while Lucy kept watch on the trail. Thank you, Claire said, for everything. I hope you find happiness in San Francisco. I hope you find justice, Lucy replied. She mounted and paused. Miss Claire, there's something else. The ledger you took. It has more than just stolen cattle records. Mr. Briggs has been working with someone in the territorial government, someone high up. That's why he wants you dead so badly. If that information gets out, important people go to prison. Ooh, Jake asked. I don't know. I only heard him mention it once, late at night when he'd been drinking. He said the governor himself owed him favors. After Lucy left, Jake and Claire sat on the porch watching darkness fall over the valley. Somewhere out there, 20 men were preparing to kill them. Somewhere further, corrupt officials waited to protect their secrets. The odds were impossible, the danger absolute. We could run different directions, Claire said quietly. Split up. You could go back to your life. I could, Jake agreed. But I won't. We started this together. We'll finish it together. You barely know me. I know enough. You're brave and smart, and you didn't deserve what happened to you. That's all I need to know. She was quiet for a long moment. After my baby died, I thought I'd never feel anything again. Carl made sure of that. But these last few days, helping with the ranch, learning to shoot, planning this trip, I've felt alive for the first time in years. You gave me that. You did it yourself. I just gave you space to remember who you were. They left an hour before dawn, walking the horses slowly until they were well away from the cabin. Jake took one last look back as the sun rose, painting the valley in gold and red. Then he turned toward the mountains and didn't look back again. The trail was steep and narrow, winding through pine forests and across rocky slopes. They rode in silence, saving their breath for the climb. By midday, they'd gained 2,000 feet in elevation. The air grew thin and cold. On the second day, they found horse tracks. Someone had come this way recently, maybe yesterday. Jake studied the prints carefully. 2 riders, heading up the mountain just like them. Briggs's men? Claire asked. Maybe. Or hunters. Could be anyone. But Jake didn't believe in coincidences. He checked his rifle and kept scanning the trail ahead. If someone was tracking them, they'd have to come from behind or wait in ambush somewhere higher up. Either way, the advantage was gone. Part 4, the ambush came on the 3rd day, where the trail narrowed between 2 cliff faces. Jake spotted the glint of metal a second before the first shot cracked across the canyon. He threw himself from his horse, dragging Claire down with him as bullets whined overhead. Their horses bolted. Jake cursed and pulled Claire behind a boulder barely large enough to cover them both. Chips of stone exploded around them as more shots echoed from the cliffs above. "How many?" Claire shouted over the gunfire. Jake risked a glance. He counted muzzle flashes from 3 positions, maybe 4 shooters total. Not the full 20 men, which meant this was an advanced party. The main force was probably still a day behind. "We're pinned," he said. "They've got the high ground, and we've got nowhere to go." The trail ahead was completely exposed, and going back meant riding straight into Briggs's main group. The cliffs on both sides were too steep to climb under fire. Jake checked his ammunition. 2 boxes of rifle cartridges and a handful of pistol rounds. Enough for a fight, but not enough to win against 4 men in fortified positions. "Give it up, Holloway," a voice called from above. It was Pete Dawson, sounding confident and amused. "You made it further than I expected, but this is the end of the line. Send the woman out and we'll let you ride away." "You'll kill us both," Jake shouted back. "Probably. But at least you'd die trying instead of bleeding out behind that rock. Your choice." Claire's hand found Jake's. Her palm was sweaty, but her grip was firm. "I won't let them take me alive," she said quietly. "Won't come to that. Promise me. If it looks bad, if they're about to capture us, you'll make it quick." Jake met her eyes. In 3 days of hard riding, she'd never complained, never slowed them down, never shown fear. Now she was asking him to kill her if necessary, and she meant it. "I promise," he said. "But I've got another idea first," he explained quickly. Claire's eyes widened, but she nodded. It was desperate and dangerous, but staying here guaranteed death. At least this gave them a chance. Jake waited for the shooting to pause while the ambushers reloaded. Then he stood up and fired 3 rapid shots at the nearest position, not aiming to hit, but to keep heads down. While they ducked, Claire ran. She sprinted back down the trail, her boots pounding on stone. The shooters saw her and opened fire, but they were too high and the angle was wrong. Bullets sparked off rocks around her, but she kept running, disappearing around a bend. "The woman's getting away," someone yelled. Jake heard scrambling above as at least 2 of them abandoned their positions to chase Claire on foot. That left 2 shooters pinning him down. The odds had just gotten better. He counted to 30, giving Claire time to reach the spot they'd discussed. Then he moved. Jake went up instead of forward, climbing the cliff face where it was broken and rough. His boots found tiny ledges, his fingers gripped cracks barely wide enough to hold. Bullets hammered the rock near him, but the angle was bad and the shooters couldn't get a clear shot without exposing themselves. He climbed 15 feet, 20, his muscles screaming. His fingers slipped, and for one terrifying second he dangled by one hand over a 30-foot drop. Then his boot found purchase and he hauled himself up to a narrow shelf. From here he could see into one of the shooters' positions. A man in a brown coat leaned out, trying to track Jake's movement. Jake aimed carefully and fired. The man jerked backward and disappeared. The second shooter panicked and ran, scrambling along the cliff trying to reach his horse. Jake let him go. The main threat was the 2 men chasing Claire, and he needed to reach her before they did. He slid back down the cliff, scraped and bleeding, and ran back down the trail. He found Claire where they'd planned, pressed against the canyon wall with his pistol in both hands. She'd retrieved their horses, which had stopped running once the shooting ended. "They're coming," she whispered. Jake took position across the trail from her, creating a crossfire. When the 2 pursuers came around the bend at full speed, they ran straight into the trap. "Drop your weapons," Jake ordered. One of them went for his gun anyway. Jake shot him in the shoulder and he went down screaming. The second man, younger and smarter, threw his pistol down and raised his hands. "Please don't kill me," he begged. "I'm just hired help. I don't even know what this is about." "Who hired you?" Claire demanded. "Pete Dawson. Said there was $100 for whoever brought back a woman and a cowboy. Dead or alive. Where's the main group? Following maybe 6 hours back. 20 men, including Mr. Briggs himself. He's real angry, ma'am." I've never seen him like this. Jake tied both men up and took their guns and ammunition. The younger one kept talking, spilling everything he knew. Briggs had put a $1,000 bounty on Claire and $500 on Jake. Half the outlaws in the territory would be looking for them. "We can't outrun that many," Claire said after they'd ridden on. "Even if we reach Silver Creek, they'll just track us there. Then we stop running," Jake said. "There's a place my grandfather showed me, about 2 hours ahead. A box canyon with only one entrance. We can defend it." "Defend it against 20 men?" "Against 100 if we have to. It's the only chance we've got." They reached the canyon as the sun set. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for horses to pass single file. Inside, the canyon opened into a natural fortress with high walls and a spring for water. Jake's grandfather had used it to winter cattle during bad storms. Now it would be their last stand. They spent the night preparing. Jake rigged tripwires across the entrance using rope from their supplies. Claire gathered rocks and piled them at strategic points for cover. They filled every container with water and checked their ammunition again. At dawn, Jake climbed to the canyon rim and looked back at their trail. In the distance, dust rose against the morning sky, 20 riders moving fast. They'd be here by noon. Claire stood beside him, looking small against the vast landscape. The wind blew her hair across her face and she brushed it back with a tired gesture. "Whatever happens today, these last few days have been the freest I've felt since I was a girl. You gave me that. Even if it ends badly, I'm grateful." "It won't end badly," Jake said with more confidence than he felt. "You can't know that." "No. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to make sure you get to Silver Creek and that ledger reaches the marshal. That's worth something." She smiled, sad and beautiful. Then she kissed him, quick and gentle, and walked back down into the canyon. Jake watched her go, feeling something shift in his chest. But for 3 years he'd been dead inside, just going through motions. Claire had reminded him what it meant to care about something beyond just surviving. He climbed down and checked the tripwires one more time. The riders appeared an hour later, spreading out in a line across the canyon approach. Carl Briggs rode in front, a big man with a hard face and cold eyes. He looked at the narrow entrance and laughed. "You've trapped yourself, Holloway. There's no way out of there except through us." "Then I guess we'll be staying a while," Jake called back. Part 5 Briggs sat his horse like he owned the world, which in many ways he did. Behind him, 20 hired guns waited for orders. Jake recognized most of them, the worst kind of men, who sold their guns to the highest bidder. Johnny Gates sat to Briggs' right, a thin man with dead eyes who cleaned his fingernails with a knife. "I'm a reasonable man," Briggs announced. "I'll make you an offer. Send Claire out and you can ride away. I'll even pay you $1,000 for your trouble. You're just a bystander in this. No need to die for someone else's wife." "Former wife?" Jake corrected. "She divorced you the minute she wrote off your property. I don't recognize that divorce. She belongs to me until I say otherwise." "Nobody belongs to you, Briggs. Not anymore." Briggs's face darkened. "You have 1 minute to reconsider. After that, we're coming in." Jake ducked back into cover. Claire crouched behind a boulder, her revolver steady in her hands. She'd come a long way from the terrified woman who'd collapsed in his yard. "Last chance to change your mind about this," Jake said. Not even slightly. The first assault came 5 minutes later. 8 men charged the entrance on foot, firing as they came. Jake's tripwires caught the first 3, sending them sprawling. Claire shot the 4th man in the leg. Jake dropped 2 more before the survivors retreated. "They're testing our defenses," Jake said, reloading. "Next time they'll come harder." The second assault was more coordinated. 10 men rushed the entrance, while the others provided covering fire. Jake and Claire worked together, him taking left targets, her taking right. The canyon entrance became a killing ground. Bodies fell and the survivors retreated again, dragging their wounded. "You're just making this harder on yourselves," Briggs shouted. "We can wait you out." "How much food do you have?" "How much ammunition? We've got supplies to last a week." Jake checked his remaining cartridges. Maybe enough for 1 more assault if they were lucky. After that, it was down to knives and fists. Claire caught his expression and understood. "There's another way," she said quietly. "Give me a rope." "What are you planning?" "The back wall of this canyon. It's not quite vertical. I think I can climb it." Jake looked where she pointed. The wall rose 200 feet, steep but broken by cracks and ledges. A skilled climber might make it, but 1 slip meant death. "You can't," he said. "I can if you cover me. I'll go up and over, circle around behind them, create a distraction. While they're dealing with me, you slip out and we both run for it. That's suicide. So is staying here." She gripped his arm. "Jake, I won't let you die for me. This is my fight. Let me finish it." Before he could argue, Gunfire erupted again. This time Briggs sent everyone at once. A full frontal assault meant to overwhelm them. Jake fired until his rifle ran dry, then switched to his pistol. Claire emptied her revolver and grabbed his rifle, working the lever as fast as she could. Men fell, but more kept coming. They were 15 feet from the entrance when Jake's pistol clicked empty. He drew his knife and prepared to meet them hand to hand. Then a new sound cut through the gunfire. Horses, many horses, coming fast from the east. Both sides stopped shooting and turned to look. 30 riders crested the ridge, led by a man wearing a silver star on his leather vest. The territorial marshal, accompanied by 24 armed deputies. They rode straight into Briggs' position, scattering his men. "Everyone drop your weapons," the marshal ordered. "This ends now." Briggs backed his horse away, his face pale. "Marshal Harding, there's been a misunderstanding. These people stole my property." "Your wife isn't property, Briggs. And I've got information that you're wanted for questioning regarding stolen cattle and government corruption. You're under arrest. You can't prove anything." "Actually, I can." A rider moved forward, and Jake's breath caught. It was Lucy Chen, looking terrified but determined. She held up a leather-bound ledger. "I went to San Francisco like I planned, but I couldn't stop thinking about what Miss Claire told me. So I went back to the house, found this in Mr. Briggs' safe, and brought it to the marshal. It's all here, every crime, every bribe, everything." Claire stumbled forward. "But I had the ledger." "I took it. You took a decoy," Lucy said. "Mr. Briggs kept the real one locked away. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." Briggs reached for his gun, but Johnny Gates was faster. The killer drew and fired, not at the marshal, but at Briggs. The cattle baron fell from his horse, clutching his chest. "He didn't pay me enough to hang," Gates said, dropping his weapon. "I'll testify against everyone if you promise me protection." Marshal Harding surveyed the scene, taking in the wounded men and the bodies. His eyes settled on Jake and Claire standing in the canyon entrance. "Someone want to explain what happened here?" Jake told the story while deputies rounded up Briggs's men. Lucy's ledger had enough evidence to put half the territorial government on trial. The marshal had been investigating Briggs for months, but lacked proof until Lucy appeared with the records. "You two are lucky to be alive," Harding said when Jake finished. "Briggs had orders from high up to make this disappear." "If we'd been an hour later." "But you weren't," Claire said. "And now he faces justice." Briggs died on the ride back to Silver Creek, his last words a curse against Claire. Jake felt nothing watching him go. Some men created so much suffering that the world was better without them. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Lucy's ledger brought down a senator, 2 judges, and a dozen other officials. Claire testified about her treatment. Another woman came forward with similar stories. The newspapers called it the biggest corruption scandal in territorial history. Jake attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back row where Claire could see him. When it ended, with convictions for everyone involved, she walked straight to him through the crowded courthouse. "What now?" she asked. "I've been thinking about that. My ranch is gone, but I've got some money saved. We could start over somewhere. Maybe buy some land, raise cattle the honest way. If you want. I know it's fast, and maybe you need time to figure things out on your own. But these last few weeks, fighting alongside you, I've felt more alive than I have in years. I'm not ready to say goodbye." Claire smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "I'm not ready either, but I have one condition." "What's that?" "You let me do the cooking. I've tasted your coffee when you make it. It's terrible." Jake laughed, surprising himself. He couldn't remember the last time he genuinely laughed. Claire joined in, and for a moment they stood there in the courthouse hallway, 2 people who'd survived hell together, laughing at nothing and everything. They married quietly a month later. Lucy stood as witness, having decided to stay in Silver Creek and open a restaurant. She hired other Chinese workers who'd been struggling to find decent employment, and her place became known for the best food in town. Jake and Claire bought a small ranch in Montana, far from the memories and corruption of their old lives. They started with 20 head of cattle and built from there. The work was hard, but they did it together. Sometimes at night, Jake would wake from dreams of the canyon fight. He'd lie there in the dark, heart-pounding, until Claire's hand found his. "It's over," she'd whisper. "We're safe now." And slowly, he'd come to believe it. Years later, when their daughter asked how they met, Claire told her the truth. "Your father hired me to cook, but what I did next changed both our lives forever." "What did you do?" the girl asked. Claire smiled at Jake across the dinner table. "I stopped running and started fighting. And I found out I was stronger than I ever imagined." Jake raised his coffee cup in silent salute. It was perfect, rich and strong, exactly how she'd made it that first morning in his cabin. Some things he'd learned, were worth fighting for. Claire had taught him that. She'd done more than save his life in that canyon. She'd given him a reason to live again. Their ranch grew over the years, becoming one of the most respected in Montana. They had 3 children, all taught to ride and shoot and stand up for what was right. Jake never forgot those desperate days running through the mountains, or the moment Claire kissed him on the canyon rim, or the way she'd looked with a revolver in her hands, refusing to give up. He'd been a lonely cowboy who hired a cook. What she did next gave him everything he'd lost, and more than he'd ever hoped to find. And every morning when he woke up beside her, watching the sun rise over their land, Jake Holloway knew he was the luckiest man alive.